Excuse me, ma'am. You're in the wrong line. The voice was sharp, not inquisitive, corrective. A woman's voice, cold, practiced, full of authority. Not the kind that came from training, but the kind born of entitlement. Kristen Price wore a navy blue blazer with a gold name badge that read Sky America, Guest Services. Her posture was military straight. Her expression was tight. Danica Holt didn't even blink. "I'm in the first-class line," she replied, calm and clear. Kristen's lips twitched into a smirk. She didn't look at the boarding pass in Danica's hand. She didn't need to. "I'm sure you think you are," Kristen said, "but this is for Sky First Elite passengers only. Economy check-in is over there." She pointed toward a crowded line of tired travelers and children screaming into tablets. Danica looked down at the boarding pass in her manicured hand. Clear as day. Sky First Elite, Seat 1A passenger. Danica Holt. Still, Kristen's eyes refused to register it. Danica looked up again. "Would you like to scan it?" Kristen folded her arms. "We don't scan until you're at the gate, and this line is for our most loyal Skylight members." There it was, the emphasis, the implication, the arrogance masked as procedure. Danica Holt had heard it before in different variations. In hotels, at investment meetings, in bank boardrooms. A subtle but familiar melody played loudly by people who thought wealth looked a certain way. And she never looked the way they expected. Tall, dark-skinned, hair in a short, tight twist out. No designer labels blaring, no entourage, no noise. Just presence. "I'm a Skylight member," Danica said again, this time slower, clearer. Kristen clicked her tongue. "And I'm Beyonce." Passengers behind Danica chuckled. Others turned away embarrassed. But no one spoke up. Not yet. Danica exhaled through her nose, not her mouth. She'd promised herself not to go viral this year. But Sky America seemed to want the smoke. She leaned in and said quietly, "I suggest you scan the pass." The woman blinked, surprised by the command in Danica's tone. She grabbed the scanner with a huff and beeped the boarding pass. Green, a long, sharp beep of approval. Kristen's face twitched. There it was. Proof, and still she said, "There must be a system error." Danica gave her the kind of smile you give to a child who's about to learn a very adult lesson. Or perhaps there's an internal error on your part. That's when a supervisor approached. Mid-40s, balding badge clipped loosely to his belt. "What's going on here?" Kristen was quick. "This woman is trying to skip the line. Claims she's Skylight." The supervisor took one look at the screen and froze. "Ms. Holt," he said, his voice changing completely. "My deepest apologies. Your car service was delayed and we meant to escort you through our private lounge." Danica tilted her head. "I would have appreciated that. Instead, I was told to go stand in the economy line." The supervisor's smile melted. Kristen's face turned red. It was only then that Kristen actually read the name on the pass. Danica Holt. The name sounded familiar, but she couldn't place it. Danica took a slow breath, stepped forward and walked toward the private Skylight lounge with dignity so loud it silenced the room. People stared now. Whispers floated behind her like smoke. Inside the glass lounge, a steward greeted her with champagne. She declined. Instead, she pulled out her phone and opened Instagram. Notifications flooded her screen. Someone had filmed it. Of course someone had. The video had already hit 47,000 views in 22 minutes. The caption read, "This black woman was told she didn't belong in first class." Then they scanned her ticket. Danica closed the app. She didn't need the internet's outrage. She wasn't here for that. She opened a different app, Slack, and sent one message to her legal counsel. "Initiate motion. Buy Sky America shares. Quietly, I want controlling interest by Q3. Also notify PR. No response yet. I'll handle this my way." By the time she boarded seat 1A, Kristen was nowhere to be found. And by the time Sky America's CEO refreshed his stock dashboard that evening, he noticed a substantial acquisition move through a quiet firm called DHT Holdings. He didn't know what it meant yet, but Danica Holt did. She didn't want an apology. She wanted the whole damn airline. By the time Danica Holt's private town car glided into her underground garage in Tribeca, the video had reached 2.7 million views. She hadn't commented. She didn't need to. Publications were already filling in the blanks. Black woman humiliated at airport. Turns out she's a billionaire CEO. Danica Holt, the executive behind the viral first-class showdown. Who really owns the Sky America might soon find out. But while the internet shouted Danica planned, she stepped out of the elevator into her penthouse where everything was glass slate and precision. Layla, her chief of staff, was already there seated at the kitchen island, 2 phones in front of her, and a laptop glowing with financial dashboards. You saw the video, Danica asked, hanging her coat. Layla didn't look up. It hit 8 million. You've been trending for 4 hours. Sky America put out a generic "We do not tolerate discrimination" statement. It's been ratioed into orbit. Danica poured herself a glass of sparkling water. Did we begin the acquisition maneuver? Started it the minute you gave the word, Layla said. Our partners in Luxembourg and Singapore are already buying through proxy accounts. You'll own a controlling stake in Sky America within 60 days if they don't catch on. Danica smiled, sipping. Oh, they'll catch on. They just won't believe it until it's too late. Layla tilted her head. What's the long game? Danica turned to face the skyline. They made a judgment about who I am based on what I look like. But that receptionist, Kristen, she's not the real problem. She's a symptom. So who's the disease? Danica turned back to Layla, her tone sharp now. Complacency. And systems built to reward it. She set her glass down and grabbed her phone. Schedule a meeting with Dean Hargrave, CEO of Sky America. Let's see how much he values his brand when it's no longer his. Layla's brows lifted. You want to meet him in person? Danica smirked. Not yet. I want to make him sweat first. Meanwhile, at Sky America headquarters in Arlington, Virginia, Dean Hargrave stormed into his 28th floor office, his face flushed from an emergency board call. Jason Voss, Executive VP of Brand and Operations, followed behind him, trying not to look panicked. Find out who let this happen, Dean snapped. I don't care if it was a gate agent, a supervisor, a janitor. I want names. Jason pulled up a report on his tablet. Her name's Kristen Price, Junior Guest Services Officer. 3 years with the company. Clean record, until now. Dean slammed his hand on the desk. Clean record. She just handed our brand to social media on a silver platter. Jason tried to calm him. We put out the standard apology. We're offering the woman a $10,000 travel voucher and a formal letter. Dean paused. The woman. Jason blinked. Yes, the passenger. You don't know who she is, Dean asked, incredulous. Jason hesitated. Dean yanked his phone off the desk, pulled up the trending article, and shoved it in Jason's face. Jason's lips parted as he read the headline. Danica Holt, the woman who just humiliated Sky America and might own us next. Holy. Yeah, Dean said. That Danica Holt. Jason sank into the chair opposite the desk. Danica Holt was the billionaire CEO of Carter Holt Ventures, a tech investment empire that had bankrolled everything from sustainable aviation startups to smart banking networks in Nairobi. She wasn't just rich, she was strategic. A former systems engineer turned titan of boardrooms. Worse, she was silent. She hadn't said a word publicly. And that silence terrified Dean more than a public rant. You think she's going to sue? Jason asked. Dean shook his head. No, if she wanted money, she'd be talking to her already. Then what? Dean looked out the window, dread creeping into his gut. She's going to buy us. And when she does, Jason leaned forward. What do we do? Dean turned, voice low. We dig. We find something. Everyone has a weakness. Jason nodded slowly, already pulling up background reports. Start with that assistant of hers, Layla. But back in New York, Danica stood in front of a 14-foot digital screen in her strategy room, reviewing every key executive profile at Sky America. She didn't want a symbolic win. She wanted infrastructure-level change. And that meant knowing who was in charge of hiring, training, culture, brand, and crisis PR. She stopped at Jason Voss. Look at this guy, Danica said. Stanford MBA. Spent time at a boutique hedge fund before jumping into aviation. No DEI record, no HR background. Just numbers. Layla leaned against the wall. What are you thinking? Danica crossed her arms. He's the one who'll fight the hardest. The others will fold. Want to neutralize him early. Danica tapped her lip, then shook her head. No, let him sweat. People like Jason do their worst damage when they're scrambling. Let's see what kind of mistake he makes. Layla nodded, then her phone buzzed. She checked it. It's starting, she said. Stock movement. No, Kristen Price just went on Fox Business. Danica arched a brow. That was fast. Layla turned the screen on. The broadcast filled the room. Kristen sat with perfectly blown-out hair and a pale pink blazer sitting upright next to a sympathetic anchor. I was just doing my job, she said tearfully. I had no idea who Ms. Holt was. I never meant any harm. Danica leaned forward, watching. And now Kristen continued, my life is in danger. I've had to delete my accounts. I'm being painted as a racist when I was following protocol. This has gone too far. Danica stared at the screen unmoved, then a small smile. Perfect, she whispered. She just gave us the perfect reason to release the footage. Layla tilted her head. From the lounge security cameras, Danica nodded. Every word. every dismissive gesture. Let's release the full unedited video tomorrow, 7:00 a.m. What's the caption? Danica looked up, eyes sharp. When protocol becomes prejudice and gets caught in 4K. By 7:03 a.m. the next morning, the video had eclipsed 12 million views on X and Instagram combined. It wasn't edited, it wasn't stylized. It was the raw, unfiltered footage from the Sky America first-class lounge surveillance system, silent at first, then overlaid with AI-enhanced audio that revealed every word Kristen Price had spoken. You people are always trying to sneak into areas you don't belong. You can't afford first class. Let's not pretend. I don't care who you say you are. I'm calling security. The video ended with Danica calm, composed, presenting her actual first-class boarding pass. Kristen's face in that moment, frozen in disbelief, became a meme by 8:00 a.m. But for Danica, this was never about internet points. This was war, and she had just made her first strike. At Sky America headquarters, the boardroom was on fire. Not literally, but with tension thick enough to slice. Dean Hargraves sat at the head of the table, jaw tight, as 9 board members stared back at him with varying levels of rage, panic, and betrayal. Do you have any idea how this is playing in Dubai? Singapore Heathrow demanded Marissa Liu, CFO of Sky America International. Our European partners are considering pulling their code-share agreements, said Charles Kendrick, head of global strategy. She released surveillance footage, snapped Angela Cruz, VP of legal. Do you know how bad that looks for us, that she had it before we even reviewed it? Dean rubbed his temples. I've already launched an internal investigation. Too late, Marissa cut in. It's already moving. What's moving, Dean asked. She didn't blink. A hostile takeover. Dean froze. Carter Holt Ventures just bought 3.4% of Sky America stock through subsidiaries in the last 24 hours, she said. We ran the shell trails. It's them, or rather her. Dean shot a look at Jason, who sat motionless, lips pressed tight. And if we don't act, Marissa continued, she'll own a controlling interest in 29 days. The room fell silent. Angela leaned forward. What if we offered her a seat on the board? Jason finally spoke. No. Dean turned toward him. Jason. No, he said again, firmer. We don't reward sabotage. She's bleeding us dry in public, humiliating us. Marissa raised an eyebrow. She didn't make Kristen Price say what she said. She didn't write your apology statement. You did. Jason flushed. Angela tapped her pen on the table. You realize she hasn't said a single word on camera, right? That's the most dangerous kind of strategy. She doesn't need to shout. She's letting our own behavior destroy us. Dean stood. Enough. We can't give her a board seat. That's like asking the executioner to help build the gallows. Marissa stood too. Then prepared to watch the stock drop another 20%. Or worse, get delisted when the airline's watchdogs start sniffing around. Angela nodded. And make no mistake, they will. You don't survive a scandal like this without bloodletting. Someone needs to be fired. Everyone looked at Jason. He stood slowly. If this is where we're going, I'll resign. Dean shook his head. No, we don't cave to PR threats. Jason turned to the group. I'll draft my exit package under protest. He left the room without another word. Elsewhere, Danica was already 5 moves ahead. Jason will step down by noon, Layla said, checking her feed. Probably before the market closes. But Kristen's doubling down again. She's on a podcast now saying you doctored the lounge footage. Danica raised an eyebrow. Interesting. Layla scrolled. She's calling it deepfake warfare. Says it's a conspiracy. Perfect, Danica said, sipping her espresso. Because that's when we release the second clip. Layla looked up. There's a second one. Danica turned her laptop toward her and opened a folder marked Incident Raw Footage. She clicked on a different file. This one showed Kristen, after the confrontation, talking to a colleague unaware of the hot mic still recording. She pulled the rich card. Classic. Bet she sells hair oil on TikTok or something. First class, please. You know she used points. I told my manager, but no one wants to be the one to say it. That's not our brand. Danica turned the screen back toward her, self-expression unreadable. Release that one at 2:30 p.m. Caption it. When the mask slips, the brand speaks. At 2:34 p.m., the fallout began. By 3:00 p.m., Kristen Price had been terminated, effective immediately. By 3:17 p.m., Sky America's customer loyalty program website crashed due to mass cancellations. By 3:43 p.m., the Department of Transportation issued a formal letter requesting compliance records on discrimination and bias incidents at major air carriers. And by 4:15 p.m., Danica had what she wanted. A call from Dean Hargraves' personal assistant requesting a private meeting. Danica didn't answer. She let the voicemail sit there unopened. Power wasn't about who spoke first, it was about who made the world wait. Danica Holt had always believed the true boardroom wasn't made of glass and steel. It was made of silence, fear, and reputation. The real game didn't unfold over contracts, it unfolded over perception. And right now, Halston Dynamics and Sky America Airlines were crumbling under the weight of their own. From the 71st floor of her tower in downtown Chicago, Danica stood by the window, arms folded across a charcoal silk blouse, watching the skyline shift beneath the early evening sun. She wasn't smiling, she wasn't gloating, she was calculating. Her assistant Layla stepped into the office, iPad in hand. Halston's legal team just issued a new statement. Danica didn't turn around. What's the angle? Layla read aloud. They've always prioritized diversity and inclusion, and this incident does not reflect the values of the company. Effective immediately, Kristen Price has been terminated, and Jason Voss has voluntarily stepped down from all active duties. A full cultural audit will begin next quarter, led by an outside firm. Danica exhaled softly, voluntarily cute. They're trying to preempt your next move. I'm already 2 moves ahead, Danica said. She finally turned from the window. Her heels clicked softly against the marble floor as she crossed to her desk. Send flowers to Monica Reed. Layla blinked. Monica, the regional ops manager you bumped into in the lobby. Danica nodded. The one who stepped in while Kristen was going off on her little tirade. I've done my research. She's been stuck in middle management for 7 years, passed over despite flawless reviews. You want to poach her? Danica smiled faintly. No, I want to elevate her from within, make her the face of their redemption story. Layla raised her eyebrows. That's bold. Danica tapped her screen, opening the strategic rollout file she drafted that morning. It's surgical. I'm not just dismantling their image, I'm choosing who rebuilds it. On my terms. Monica Reed had no idea her life was about to change. She was used to blending in. That was her survival tactic in the Halston ecosystem. Be excellent but not threatening. Efficient but never loud. She kept her hair in tight curls, her jewelry neutral, her language professional to the point of sterile. But the viral video had changed everything. She hadn't realized she was visible in the background until her daughter pointed it out over breakfast. Mom, look, that's you. You're right behind the lady everyone's talking about. Monica had frozen. There she was holding a tablet, stepping forward just as the confrontation happened. And now her inbox was flooded with LinkedIn messages. Some offering support, others asking for her version of the story. She'd said nothing. She couldn't afford to, not without risking her job. Until Layla showed up at her cubicle. Ms. Reed. Monica looked up. Yes, my name is Layla. I work directly with Danica Holt. Monica blinked, unsure if it was a prank. She'd like to meet with you, privately, at your earliest convenience. I'm not sure I understand. Layla smiled warmly. You're going to want to take this meeting. That afternoon in a private suite at the Langham Hotel, Monica sat across from Danica Holt, sipping a chai latte with shaking hands. Danica didn't pressure her. She simply listened. I just didn't want things to escalate, Monica said, recounting what little she'd done that day. I knew Kristen was wrong, but I didn't think it was my place to intervene. Danica finally spoke. You didn't just intervene, you set the tone. You didn't raise your voice or argue, you introduced facts. That's leadership. Monica swallowed. I was terrified I'd be fired just for speaking. Danica's expression turned steel. And that's the problem I'm going to fix. But I need you to be willing to step forward. Monica's eyes widened. Step forward. How? Danica opened a leather folder. Halston Dynamics is about to create a new position, Chief of Equity and Operational Integrity. I convinced the board it was necessary. They're letting me recommend the first appointee. Monica stared at her. You want me? I do. But I need you to understand this won't be easy. You'll face resistance. You'll be tested. Monica hesitated. Then she straightened her spine. Then let's get started. The news broke the next morning. Monica Reed promoted to executive role at Halston following viral discrimination incident. Some clapped, some scoffed, some whispered she was a diversity puppet. Danica heard all of it and smiled, because every time they underestimated Monica, they fueled her rise. And the timing was perfect. At 9:17 a.m., the market opened. By 10:03, Halston shares had surged 7.2%, not because of corporate apology videos or legal maneuvering, but because a Black woman had been seen, truly seen, and elevated with intention. Danica made sure of it. Meanwhile, Kristen Price was spiraling. Her podcast appearances backfired. Her attempts to paint herself as a victim of deepfake warfare only made her a bigger punchline. Worse, Danica had released an internal email thread one Kristen had sent months ago mocking a Haitian employee for his accent. The screenshots were undeniable. Kristen's agent dropped her. Her book deal collapsed. And when she applied for a new job in PR, Danica made sure her name was already on every blacklist in the industry. Danica didn't call it revenge. She called it quality control. But she wasn't done. Later that evening, Layla entered the office again. Sky America's board wants a call. Danica didn't look up. Tell them I'm busy. They said it's urgent. Danica tapped her fingers once, then nodded. Schedule it and prep the paperwork. Layla blinked. You mean? Danica finally smiled. It's time. When Danica Holt finally stepped into the virtual boardroom with Sky America Airlines, she wasn't wearing a blazer. She wore a navy silk blouse with no logo, no pin, no power accessory. Her expression, however, said it all. The call had started with pleasantries, empty ones. Miss Holt, thank you for making the time. We've admired your leadership from afar. We deeply regret the incident involving our ground staffs. Danica held up a hand. Let's stop pretending this is a social call. You want me on this call because your stock has dropped 14% since last Friday. Your diversity report mysteriously disappeared from your website, and you're now trending behind Spirit Airlines in customer sentiment. That's a humiliation I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. Silence. She let it settle. I'm not here to litigate the incident. That part of the story is already over. What I want to discuss is how you recover. Because let's be honest, your airline needs an image overhaul, and I'm the only one who can deliver it. The chairman cleared his throat. What are you proposing exactly? Danica clicked a button on her screen. A sleek, minimalist slide deck filled the view. It was titled Equity in the Air, a buyout proposal from Carter Holt Ventures. Gasps. One board member actually said Jesus Christ under his breath. You want to bias asked another? Danica tilted her head. I want a controlling interest. 51%. I'll inject capital restructure, the executive team rebrand the customer experience, and integrate a new leadership development program through Monica Reed's initiative. In 6 months, your public trust index will bounce back. In 12, your profitability will surpass pre-scandal levels. The chairman folded his arms. With respect, Ms. Holt, this is hostile. Not at all. Hostile would be me letting your company bleed out while I start my own boutique airline and poach your best pilots. This is a lifeline. You just don't like the color of the hand offering it. Her tone didn't rise. It didn't need to. It was surgical. Take your time, she said, closing the deck. You have 72 hours. After that, I go direct to your shareholders. That night, Danica met Monica for dinner at a quiet rooftop restaurant in Lincoln Park. The wind was crisp, but the heaters gave a warm golden glow. You really offered to buy them out? Monica asked, stunned. Danica sipped her Cabernet. They expected me to demand an apology. I gave them a business plan instead. Monica laughed in disbelief. What if they accept? Then I rebuild it. And you help me. Monica grew quiet. You know they're going to come after you harder now. Media, lobbyists, even people who pretended to support you last week. Danica nodded. Let them. I'm not afraid of their noise. I'm afraid of silence. That's where injustice thrives. There was a pause between them. In that stillness, Monica realized something that gave her goosebumps. Danica didn't want revenge. She wanted infrastructure. She wanted permanence. She was redesigning the system, not protesting it. Elsewhere in a suburban townhouse outside the city, Kristen Price was drafting yet another unhinged blog post. This is cancel culture gone too far, she typed. They weaponized race to destroy me, even though I was just enforcing airline policy. It wasn't about color, it was about procedure. Why can't anyone see that? She uploaded it to a fringe media site. 5 people clicked it, 1 commented. The comment said, "Cry harder, Karen." Kristen was unraveling. Her face had been used in memes, her voice auto-tuned into TikTok skits. Her old sorority had cut ties. A conservative podcast invited her on, but canceled the episode when Danica posted leaked audio of Kristen calling a Latina flight attendant spicy in a meeting from 2 years ago. She paced her living room, muttering, it wasn't supposed to be like this. The world had moved on, but she hadn't. Meanwhile, Jason Voss was trying to negotiate a quiet exit package from Halston. He still had allies on the board, people who didn't like Danica's power play. But Danica had already outmaneuvered them. Just as Jason was finalizing his terms with Halston's lawyers, an email leaked, an internal document outlining his attempts to suppress minority promotions. His golden parachute turned into a rusted anchor. The board forced him to resign without severance. Danica's fingerprints were nowhere on the leak, but everyone knew it was her doing. Back at Carter Holt headquarters, Danica stood in front of her core executive team. The whiteboards were filled with strategy trees, branding phases, and legal contingencies. She pointed to a large word circled in red airborne. This is our rebrand campaign. If Sky America folds and sells, she said, if they resist, we'll fund a startup from scratch. Pilots, tech, and facilities are already scouted. We'll launch in Q2. A young intern raised her hand. What if the media paints it as vengeance? Danica smiled. Then we'll reframe the story, not as a black woman taking revenge, but as a CEO restoring order to chaos. That's the narrative people will believe. Because deep down, even the doubters crave competence. Another exec added, we just got a call from Bloomberg. They want an exclusive. Danica nodded. Let them in. That night, Danica sat alone in her office. The city lights flickered like digital stars beneath her. She opened a drawer and pulled out a photo of her father in a crisp mechanic's jumpsuit, standing beside the first car he ever fixed. He'd once told her baby girl systems are just broken machines. Find the leak patch, the hose replace the parts, and you can make anything run again. She looked out the window. The system was broken, but she had the tools, and she was done asking for permission to use them. The media storm, following Danica's offer to acquire a controlling stake in Sky America, didn't wait for the 72-hour deadline to expire. By the next morning, headlines splashed across every business and mainstream news outlet. Danica Holt makes power play for Sky America. Revolution or revenge? Forbes. Can one woman save an airline? Bloomberg canceled her crown. The billion-dollar gamble of Danica Holt. CNN Business. The narratives varied. Some praised her vision and boldness. Others warned of overreach of identity politics masquerading as business reform. But what united all headlines was one fact: Danica was now a threat to the old guard. And the old guard didn't go down quietly. Behind closed doors, the whisper war had begun. At the Montrose Club, an exclusive circle of legacy CEOs and airline magnates gathered over scotch and cigars. They spoke not in press releases or interviews, but in strategy. She's trying to turn corporate equity into social dominance, said Charles Pennington, retired Delta board chair. Danica Holt has no airline experience. She's flashy media trained, but she hasn't flown through a fuel crisis or pilot strike, another added. She's a disruptor, grumbled a third. And if we don't stop her here, she'll make Carter Holt the Amazon of aviation. What they didn't realize or couldn't admit was that Danica had already read the playbook they were dusting off. She'd studied how legacy institutions survive shakeups by turning public discourse against their challengers. They'd frame her as dangerous, divisive, reckless, and hope the weight of that perception would do the dirty work. And they had the tools: whisper campaigns, planted op-eds, sudden legal reviews of her past ventures. By midnight, 3 major shareholders of Sky America received anonymous tips urging them to oppose Danica's proposal. The next day, Danica stood before her core advisory team. Do you know what I admire about parasites? She asked, clicking on a slide that showed headlines dripping with coded language. They're silent. They drain the host slowly. You never feel the bite until it's too late. She turned to her team. We're being bled, not by direct attack, by whispers, anonymous emails, coordinated PR pieces. They're trying to make this feel like it's too much, too messy, too divisive. Monica Reed leaned forward. So we respond. Danica shook her head. No, we escalate. She clicked the remote again. A new slide appeared. A face: Marla Benson, former Sky America COO, who had quietly resigned after whistleblower reports of racial and gender discrimination in her division. We bring out the skeletons, but not from our closet, from theirs. Later that evening, Danica sat down for a televised interview with legendary journalist Valerie Nash on the Horizon Line, a Sunday night show watched by millions. The tone was civil but piercing. You've been called ruthless, Valerie said. Calculated. Some have compared your strategy to a corporate coup. What do you say to that? Danica didn't flinch. I say leadership looks ruthless when you've only ever known control through politeness and passivity. I'm not here to smile through disrespect. I'm here to win. Valerie raised an eyebrow. Is this personal? Danica looked into the camera. It became personal the moment someone saw my skin before my skills. The moment I was told, you don't look like first class. That's when this stopped being about me and started being about all of us. Within 24 hours, the clip had gone viral. Hashtags like #Danica takes flight and #first class reform dominated Twitter and Instagram. Public opinion began to shift back in her favor. Even some skeptics now said whether or not you agree with her methods, she's exposing the rot. But in the wings, someone else was watching closely. Elliot Vance, former Carter Holt board member and now chairman of a powerful lobbying firm in D.C., had been hired by Sky America shareholders to neutralize Danica's bid quietly. He smiled to himself as he read the transcript of her Valerie Nash interview. She's good, he murmured, but she's predictable. He opened a file labeled Holt Classified. Inside were financial audits, investor disputes, and a signed affidavit from a former Carter Holt executive assistant. It wasn't explosive, but it didn't need to be true. It just needed to look credible enough for a congressional ethics inquiry. Elliot picked up the phone. Let's leak it to the Atlantic. Tell them it's a matter of public interest. 2 days later, a new headline spread like wildfire. Exclusive Danica Holt, accused of misappropriating venture funds in early career. The Atlantic. The article was littered with suggestive language, vague timelines, and anonymous sources. It cast doubt, not proof, but it was effective. The market flinched. Sky America's board hesitated. Danica's public trust index dipped 5 points in one day. Monica stormed into Danica's office with the article in hand. This is sabotage. Danica calmly closed her laptop. No, this is fear, and fear means they're running out of options. Should we issue a statement? Danica shook her head. No, not yet. Let them hang themselves with their own rope. Monica frowned. What does that mean? Danica looked out the window. It means they just declared war. And I never lose a war I didn't start. The news cycle had entered a fever pitch. By Wednesday morning, every major outlet ran segments dissecting Danica Holt's past, not to reveal truth, but to muddy it. Talking heads speculated endlessly about her temperament, ego, and questionable ambition. Few mentioned the source documents lacked concrete evidence. Fewer still mentioned the suspicious timing. Danica stood alone in the executive conference room of Carter Holt's Manhattan headquarters, staring at the wall of glass that gave her a panoramic view of the skyline. She didn't see buildings, she saw traps. Each window pane became a reflection of her past choices, made enemies, buried allies, lost along the way. You don't become a black woman billionaire CEO by walking a polite path. And that was what made her dangerous. Not the smear campaign, not the whispers, but the fact that she knew they were coming and still walked straight into the fire. Her phone buzzed. A secure line. One of only 3 people had the code to call this number. She picked up, Danica Holt. A pause. Then you always were too proud to call first. The voice curled like a smoke, warm, familiar, treacherous. Danica froze. It had been 7 years since she'd heard Victor Hale's voice. Once her chief strategy officer, once her closest confidant, then her betrayer. He had disappeared after an internal scandal involving falsified investor updates and backdoor deals. Danica had offered him a private settlement in exchange for silence. Victor had taken the payout and vanished. Now he was back. I assume you've seen The Atlantic, he said. Sloppy work, but dangerous enough to slow you down. What do you want, Victor? I want a seat at the table. She laughed, sharp as glass. You forfeited your seat when you lied to my face in front of the board. That was business, D. And right now you need someone who understands war, not just vision. Danica remained quiet. Victor continued, I have documents. Emails, financial statements, timestamps. I can prove the accusations in the Atlantic piece are false, fabricated. More importantly, I can prove who leaked them. Danica's pulse didn't change, but her fingers curled tighter around the phone. And what do you want in return? Sky America's Europe expansion. I get 7% equity in the new fleet, nothing more. Danica smiled thinly. Still selling scraps from other people's empires. I'll take that as a yes, he said. I'll take it as a maybe, she replied, ending the call. Within the hour, she had Layla pull up Victor's old access logs from the Carter Holt Cloud Archive. Every document he claimed to have should have been destroyed years ago. But Victor was many things, and careless was never one of them. Danica turned to Layla. I want you to vet every file he sends. Deep forensics, metadata. I want to know when it was touched by whom and how he got it. Layla nodded. Danica turned to Monica. And I want you to call Dean Hargrave. Monica blinked. You're calling the CEO of Sky America? I'm offering him a lifeline. The video call that followed was sterile, clinical, and wrapped in corporate pleasantries. Dean Hargrave looked tired, worn down by his board and PR team, surrounded by lawyers who whispered off camera. I appreciate you taking the meeting, Danica said. You left me little choice, Dean replied with a forced smile. Between your public offer and the avalanche of media attention, I think even my gardener has an opinion now. Danica leaned forward. Then let me simplify it. I'm not your enemy. The people whispering in your ear, the ones pushing doubt, pushing fear, they don't want to save Sky America. They want to use it as a firewall to protect their dying institutions. Dean shifted slightly. Danica pressed on. I don't want a hostile takeover, but I will not let my name be dragged through filth while you do nothing. I have the evidence of a coordinated smear campaign leaked from inside your board. Dean's eyebrows raised. You're accusing my board of corporate sabotage? I'm stating a fact. and you have 48 hours to decide if you want to be remembered as the CEO who collaborated with cowards or the one who turned the tide. The call ended in silence. That evening, a flash drive was couriered to Danica's home. No label, no sender, just one note. For when you're ready to burn the house down. V. Layla scanned the drive and within 10 minutes confirmed its authenticity. Victor had delivered. Detailed logs, internal emails, a call transcript between a Sky America director and Elliot Vance's team, even a draft memo planning more allegations Danica hadn't seen yet. Monica stared at the screen. If we release this, it'll start a war. Danica nodded. Then let's make sure we win it. The next morning, Carter Holt Ventures filed a formal ethics complaint with the SEC, attaching the evidence packet. Simultaneously, they filed a civil defamation suit against Elliot Vance, Sky America director Gary Fenwick, and 3 unnamed John Does. Within hours, the story flipped. New headlines burst across the digital landscape. Holt strikes back. Billionaire CEO alleges smear campaign by Sky America board. Wall Street Journal SEC to review coordinated attacks against Danica Holt. Reuters. Victor Hale returns as whistleblower in corporate espionage case, CNBC. And just like that, the predator became the prey. By evening, Danica sat alone again, not in fear but in calculation. Victor was a weapon, unstable, dangerous, but precise. She'd use him for now. Monica entered the room quietly. You know he's going to want more than 7 per... Danica didn't look up. Then I'll give him just enough to keep him close, until I don't need him anymore. Monica hesitated, then added, Sky America's board is holding an emergency session tomorrow. Hargrave just texted he wants to meet. Danica nodded. She looked at the skyline once more, but this time she saw something else. Not traps, not threats, opportunity. She whispered to herself, let them burn their own house down. I'll build a runway from the ashes. The hush inside the boardroom was deafening. Dean Hargrave stood alone at the head of Sky America's high-rise conference center overlooking the Potomac, his reflection faint in the glass behind him. The leather seats surrounding the long oval table were mostly filled, but for once, none of the board members spoke. Their expressions said it all. Shame, worry, calculation. The civil complaint Danica Holt had filed hit like a missile. The SEC complaint was the detonation that followed. Now news of Victor Hale's corroborating evidence and the fact that Sky America's own director Gary Fenwick was implicated in a wiretapped call was the embers left in the air. The media frenzy outside had begun devouring Sky America's brand reputation faster than even the board had anticipated. Dean cleared his throat. Before we start this session, I want it understood that anyone with direct involvement in these leaks should remove themselves from the room. No one moved. A beat passed. Then Fenwick stood up. No eye contact, no defense, just a quiet gathering of his briefcase and coat. As he reached the door, he paused. You should have listened when she warned us. He left. No one said goodbye. Dean took his seat. Let's begin. 2 hours later, he stepped into a quiet cafe in Arlington, disguised in a plain navy windbreaker and a baseball cap. The back booth was empty, except for one woman with a laptop black blazer and unshakable calm. Danica. She didn't stand when he arrived. She didn't speak first either. Dean slipped into the seat across from her, signaling the waitress silently. After the server left, he finally said, I underestimated you. Danica raised an eyebrow. You let your board act like petty warlords with outdated maps. I didn't need to be underestimated. I needed to be respected. He nodded, which brings me to why I'm here. She waited. Dean leaned in, folding his hands. Sky America's board has agreed to step down from its partnership committee overseeing the international fleet. We're offering you the full strategic lead. You'll have 60% operational control. In exchange, we'd like to avoid a full-scale merger, or worse, a hostile acquisition. Danica didn't flinch. He went on, I've spoken to stakeholders. They're willing to cut loose the dead weight. Fenwick's gone, 2 more are resigning. We'll restructure. Quietly. Danica's voice was steady. And if I decline, Dean looked down. We both know you could bleed us dry in court, but that would take 2 years. 3. And by then the brand might be beyond saving. You don't need wreckage, you need runway. Silence settled between them. Danica finally spoke. Here's my counter. Dean sat straighter. You give me full veto power over all board recommendations tied to fleet expansion. I get to appoint 2 directors of my own, publicly. You don't get to bury this behind closed doors, and you issue a formal, on-record acknowledgement of the smear campaign naming no names, but affirming that I was targeted with false and malicious intent. Dean's face tightened. And in return, he asked, I withdraw my lawsuit. Victor Hale disappears again. and I become your strongest partner instead of your slow destruction. Dean hesitated, but in the end he reached across the table. They shook hands. That night, Monica sat across from Danica in the penthouse lounge, her laptop glowing softly. You're seriously letting them off the hook? Danica sipped her whiskey. I'm letting them hang themselves at their own pace. What we need now is control, not chaos. Monica leaned forward, and Victor. Danica smiled. He thinks I'll give him 7% equity in the new fleet. Monica raised an eyebrow. Danica continued. Instead, I'll grant him an advisory title under a shell subsidiary, pay him through a strategic licensing fee, and let him think he's won. But he'll never touch the real core again. Monica chuckled. Remind me never to get on your bad side. Danica looked out over the skyline. You already did, she said flatly. Monica froze. But then Danica added, and you chose the right side when it mattered. Silence stretched out between them, thick with both history and unspoken forgiveness. Then the alert pinged on Monica's laptop. She turned the screen toward Danica. Sky America press release. Sky America Airlines is pleased to announce an expanded partnership with Carter Holt Ventures. Effective immediately, Danica Holt will lead all strategic operations on the Europe-Asia Fleet Integration Program. We also formally recognize Ms. Holt was the subject of malicious and false allegations, and we stand with her in condemning attempts to sabotage visionary leadership. Danica read it once. Then again, Monica waited. Finally, Danica whispered, now we begin. 2 days later, the business media couldn't stop spinning. Danica Holt doesn't just win. She redraws the map. Fast Company, from sabotage to sovereignty. How Danica Holt secured the sky. The Financial Post, Victor Hale reappears as shadow strategist. Again, Forbes. But in a dim private hotel bar in Zurich, another meeting unfolded. Victor Hale, dressed like a tired banker, sipped brandy as he waited. The door opened. Jason Voss entered. The former Sky America COO looked older, bitter. The collapse of his alliance with Fenwick had cost him his seat, his pension package, and his reputation. You told me she'd collapse, Jason growled. Victor didn't flinch. I told you she'd react. I didn't say you'd survive it. You're using me, Jason spat. Victor shrugged. Everyone's a tool. Some are just sharper than others. Jason slammed his glass down. I want back in. Victor smiled. Then make yourself useful. Back in New York, Danica had already moved on to the next fight, integrating Carter Holt's AI logistics network into Sky America's outdated routing system. If successful, it would give her control over the largest intercontinental transport corridor on the East Coast. But she knew better than to relax, because somewhere in the shadows, old enemies were rebuilding. And this time they wouldn't aim for her name. They'd aim for the infrastructure beneath it, and she was ready. The storm didn't arrive in headlines. It didn't come with scandal or leaks. It crept in through memos, regulatory footnotes, and a discreet letter from the Department of Transportation. Danica read the letter 3 times before setting it down. It was addressed formally to Carter Holt Ventures, but it might as well have had her name written across the top in bold red. Notice of proposed oversight review. Cross-corporate influence on commercial aviation infrastructure. It was the kind of phrasing that sounded bland until you understood what it meant. A federal investigation. Antitrust whisperings. The suggestion that Carter Holt Ventures had too much influence over air traffic logistics on both coasts. And at the center of it all, Danica Holt's new alliance with Sky America. She stood by the window of her office in Manhattan, arms crossed tightly as Monica entered carrying a tablet. You saw it. Danica nodded. They're not just targeting the partnership, Monica said. They're targeting you. Danica didn't blink. Of course they are. And I know exactly who pulled the first string. 2,000 miles away, Victor Hale reviewed a printed dossier inside a private cybersecurity firm in Palo Alto. The man seated across from him wore horn-rimmed glasses and a discomforting grin. You're not worried she'll catch on, the analyst asked, tapping the final page. Victor smiled faintly. Danica's smart, brilliant even. But brilliance breeds blind spots. She sees power moves coming from boards and brokers, not bureaucrats. He tapped the letter. That's not a frontal attack. It's erosion, reframing. You change the terrain, you force her to spend her energy holding ground instead of expanding. And when she burns through her legal team's budget-fighting compliance, Victor's eyes glittered. She'll be forced to compromise again. And this time Jason Voss will be waiting. Jason Voss had returned to New York under a false consulting umbrella. He was leaner now, half the man in stature but twice as venomous. He worked out of a co-op law office in Midtown, tucked behind a shipping supply company on 48th. And his mission was clear. Find cracks in the Sky America Carter Holt merger documents. Exploit them. He had already found 3. But he needed one more, a structural clause that could be twisted into an allegation of monopolistic collusion. It was buried deep in a joint fleet optimization protocol. A clause Danica herself had insisted on giving Carter Holt emergency routing authority during weather crises. Jason grinned when he saw it. "This is it," he whispered. "This is the match." At Carter Holt headquarters, Danica convened a war room. Not a legal meeting, not a PR check-in, a war room. 3 walls were covered in timelines, stakeholder maps, and color-coded threat assessments. The fourth was a projection screen displaying real-time analytics of federal agency chatter. "This isn't about business anymore," Danica told her team. "It's about influence, control, perception." Monica stepped forward. "I've traced the regulatory trigger to a consulting firm in D.C. They've handled FAA policy briefings for Jason Voss." The room went quiet. Danica nodded. "Then he's not working alone. Someone fed him the clause. Victor probably. Maybe someone inside our own ranks." Her CTO raised a hand. "We've started deep logging communications, internal breach sweeps." Danica glanced around the room. "I want all strategic documents moved to encrypted cloud zones, paper backups, redundancy protocols. If they want to fight us with subtlety, we'll respond with precision." Then she looked at Monica. "And I want you to go to D.C. quietly. Talk to my old friend at the Senate Aviation Subcommittee. Let's see how many enemies still think I'm alone." Meanwhile, the press began to shift tone. What had once been admiration turned speculative. Has Danica Holt consolidated too much power? CNBC. Brilliance or monopoly? Carter Holt's strategic grip raises, eyebrows Business Insider. From underdog to overlord Politico. Danica didn't respond publicly. She didn't need to. Instead, she turned her attention to logistics sovereignty, a quiet rollout of proprietary software into the Sky America system. It was AI-assisted machine learning optimized and built entirely in-house by Carter Holt's division in Atlanta. Once fully integrated, it would make Danica's control unremovable. Even if regulators tried to dissolve the partnership, the infrastructure itself would remain dependent on her system. It wasn't just leverage, it was legacy. But in a glass-walled penthouse suite above the East River, Victor Hale reviewed a different kind of document, a subpoena draft. Jason had passed it to him personally, fresh from a federal investigator in the antitrust division. A draft complaint alleging that the Carter Holt AI routing network had the potential to create exclusive bottlenecks across U.S. air transport corridors. If it became real, it could freeze Danica's operations for 6 months, maybe more. But Victor didn't file it yet. He waited. Because Danica had one weakness he hadn't exploited. The media loved her. Wall Street respected her. Tech circles adored her. But Washington still didn't trust her. And in D.C., trust was the currency of survival. Monica's visit to Capitol Hill was short but decisive. She met with Senator Arlen Duke, an old friend of Danica's from the early infrastructure hearings a decade ago. Duke listened quietly, flipping through the compliance statements and FAA partnership charters. When Monica paused, he leaned forward. "I know what they're doing," he said, "but you're going to need a public win fast." Monica frowned. "What kind of win?" "A safety breakthrough, a humanitarian airlift, a crisis response, something that shows the world that what Danica's building isn't about power, it's about resilience." He tapped the folder. "And you need to do it before they file that subpoena, because once it hits, perception's out of your hands." Danica stood alone in her private strategy room that night, staring at a silent screen. For a brief moment, she felt the weight of the war, the maneuvering, the isolation, the cunt. But she didn't flinch. Instead, she picked up her phone. "Get me the director of FEMA," she said. "I have a new proposal for interagency emergency air logistics, something that might save lives this hurricane season." Then she hung up and whispered to herself, "If they want to turn perception into a weapon, I'll use truth as the blade." The first forecast alert was buried deep in NOAA's weekly bulletin, Tropical System 92L, forming in the lower Atlantic with a high chance of development. To most, it was just a routine weather event. But to Danica Holt, it was an opportunity wrapped in urgency. By the time the system had a name, Hurricane Callista, Danica had already put her plan into motion. She didn't wait for FEMA to call, she called them. In a 27-minute strategy call with FEMA's Deputy Director Elaine Ward, Danica proposed a joint emergency airlift protocol. It was bold, aggressive, and unprecedented. Carter Holt's routing AI would be temporarily licensed free of charge to FEMA's disaster response team for the duration of the crisis. Not for profit, for public good. Danica also committed 6 Sky America cargo jets, 5 regional landing hubs, and Carter Holt's proprietary fuel logistics software, all to help deliver emergency supplies to threatened coastal areas before landfall. Elaine Ward was stunned. No corporations ever offered this kind of preemptive support, she said cautiously. What's in it for you? Danica didn't miss a beat. Nothing. Except the truth. I want the world to know we're here to serve, not dominate. There was a pause. Then Elaine said, you just bought yourself allies on the Hill. The media pounced on the announcement within hours. Danica Holt mobilizes emergency fleet as Hurricane Callista strengthens. NBC Carter Holt's AI saves lives. FEMA taps private sector in historic move. Washington Post. From corporate raider to guardian angel in the Atlantic. For the first time in weeks, Danica's face reappeared on major networks, but not as a monopolist, as a visionary responder. Even her harshest critics had to admit no one had ever used corporate infrastructure so swiftly to serve national interest. And it wasn't charity, it was calculated compassion. Her internal team moved like a military operation. Monica Reed flew to Baton Rouge to coordinate staging. CTO Laura Kingston oversaw satellite link-up with FEMA's disaster command. The AI engineers worked around the clock to build FEMA access dashboards with zero margin for error. By the time Hurricane Callista made landfall in Georgia, Carter Holt's airlift protocol had already pre-positioned over 720 tons of supplies across 5 states. Lives were saved, period. And Danica made sure everyone knew it without gloating, without spin. Just the facts, quiet public proof. Meanwhile, in Washington, Jason Voss paced inside a D.C. conference room, watching the headlines roll in. This wasn't supposed to happen, he muttered. Victor Hale stood by the window, jaw clenched. She flipped the optics, hard. The draft subpoena, which had felt like a torpedo days earlier, now sat untouched on the table, suddenly radioactive. Filing that now would make us look vindictive, Victor said. Jason cursed under his breath. We're losing momentum, and she's gaining narrative control. The longer we wait, the harder this gets. Victor turned slowly. Then we leak the clause. Jason blinked. What? Victor's voice lowered. Forget the subpoena. Just leak the internal clause, the one about Carter Holt's emergency routing control. Frame it as FEMA being strong-armed into accepting private dominance over federal systems. Jason hesitated. It's risky. If they trace it back to us, they won't. We'll route it through an anonymous policy watchdog. Let the public do the rest. Jason cracked a slow, crooked smile. All right, if she wants to play hero, let's see how the public feels about her being the gatekeeper of air rescue. The leak hit Twitter first. An anonymous whistleblower account posted excerpts of the routing clause from the Sky America Carter Holt agreement, claiming FEMA had been coerced into using proprietary infrastructure during a national crisis. Within hours, major outlets picked it up. Did FEMA just surrender control to a private company? Vox backlash mounts over Danica Holt's benevolent takeover. Reuters emergency or exploitation, the new republic. Even though FEMA issued a prompt statement defending the partnership, the damage was done. The headlines had already sown doubt. Danica stood in her war room, arms crossed, watching the coverage. She didn't speak for a full minute. Then she turned to Monica. Trace the leak. I want to know who, and I want it on my desk by morning. Monica nodded. And in the meantime, Danica narrowed her eyes. We doubled down. If they think I'm hiding, they'll be surprised when I show up in D.C. myself. 2 days later, Danica Holt walked into a Senate subcommittee hearing room wearing a charcoal blazer and no visible security detail. She wasn't subpoenaed. She wasn't called. She volunteered. Chairs turned. Reporters stood. Her presence was a statement of absolute confidence. Senator Arlen Duke looked up from his notes and cleared his throat. Ms. Holt, we understand you requested time to speak on record regarding recent developments. Danica nodded. Yes, Senator. I'd like to clarify what's fact, what's fiction, and why this isn't about monopoly. It's about emergency readiness. And for the next 38 minutes, Danica delivered the most searing, composed, and technically flawless testimony the chamber had heard in a decade. She laid out the metrics, delivery timelines, fuel efficiency ratios, life-saving calculations. She showed charts of pre-positioned supplies, real-time rescue analytics, and FEMA's own satisfaction metrics. Then finally she addressed the leak. I authorize full transparency in our routing protocols, she said firmly. The clause being circulated online was designed to enable faster federal response during emergencies. Not to profit, not to control, but to act. The room was silent, and then Senator Duke leaned forward. Ms. Holt, I think you just rewrote the playbook for public-private collaboration. That night, Danica sat alone in her hotel suite overlooking the Capitol Dome. She had won the round, again, but she wasn't smiling, because she knew Victor Hale and Jason Voss weren't done. They'd pivot. They'd regroup. and they'd strike again, perhaps from another direction she hadn't anticipated. She picked up her phone and called Monica. "Get me access to our European division files," she said. "I think they're going to come after our international logistics next. We need to be 10 steps ahead." Monica hesitated. "Danica, you can't keep playing chess with ghosts. You need rest." Danica's voice softened, but her resolve didn't waver. "I'll rest when the game is over, and I'm the one writing the rules." 3 days after her Senate appearance, Danica Holt was back in New York, but sleep hadn't returned with her. The adrenaline hadn't worn off. Not after Washington, not after turning the tide. But a storm was brewing 4,000 miles away, and this time it wasn't weather. It started with an encrypted message from her Brussels office, urgent Luxembourg Commission, initiating compliance audit, alleging breach of Article 62.1. Danica read the message twice, then a third time. The phrase made her jaw tighten. Article 62.1, European Air Sovereignty Regulations, was the one statute Carter Holt had danced around for years. Not violated, not broken, but interpreted creatively. It had always been a matter of strategic ambiguity, but now it had become a weapon. And Danica knew exactly who had handed them the blade. "Victor," she whispered aloud. Victor Hale stood before a map of Europe in a private room inside a Paris law firm. He had just left a closed-door meeting with an EU trade envoy, a former classmate now turned ally. Jason Voss joined him looking smug. They took the bait. Victor nodded. The Luxembourg Commission voted unanimously. "They're framing it as a precautionary compliance review, but with the right narrative, it'll look like Carter Holt is steamrolling European sovereignty." "Even better," Jason said. "It'll freeze her expansion and trigger secondary reviews in South Korea and Brazil." Victor took a sip of espresso. "She won in the U.S. because she acted like a patriot. Let's see how she plays when they call her a colonialist." Back in Manhattan, Danica summoned her global compliance chief, Rajiv Gopal, for an emergency late-night session. He arrived half-awake, briefcase in hand, and sweat already pooling at his collar. "This is serious," he said, dropping a folder onto her glass table. "Luxembourg rarely moves alone. If they coordinate with the ICAO or Untrade, we could be looking at a full international embargo." Danica flipped open the file. The Commission's inquiry cited undue influence over national aviation routing infrastructure and possible dual-use exploitation of AI for commercial and strategic leverage. In other words, they're accusing her of acting like a nation-state. Danica didn't flinch. "We have 3 options," she said. Rajev looked up surprised. 1, comply and get buried in red tape. 2, lawyer up and stall until it blows over. Or 3, she paused, we give them something they don't expect. Rajev raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" Danica leaned forward, eyes sharp. "Transparency, brutal, surgical, and unfiltered." The next morning, every European commissioner, ambassador, and trade minister received an invite. Carter Holt open session on global AI, aviation ethics and sovereignty, Geneva. Wednesday, 10 a.m. No press, no PR. Just one woman, a live panel of engineers, and full access to every algorithm Carter Holt used in European airspace. "Are you insane?" Monica asked when she saw the announcement. "You're exposing your crown jewel tech to bureaucrats." Danica just smiled faintly. "I'm exposing the truth, and they won't know what to do with it." In Geneva's Palais des Nations, diplomats filed into the auditorium expecting a presentation. What they got was a masterclass. Danica walked in with only a tablet. No suit, no branding, just her in a neutral gray dress and unshakable calm. For 2 hours, she broke down her AI systems line by line. She brought engineers to explain fault tolerances, ethical constraints, and sovereignty hard stops. "Our systems are designed to respect national borders. The AI does not decide, it responds." She pulled up maps showing how Carter Holt tech actually reduced air traffic conflict zones across 11 EU countries. She offered open audits, live data access, and most surprisingly, a licensing model that allowed EU nations to own their AI replicas while retaining Carter Holt's support only as advisors. Gasps, murmurs, a few whispered phone calls. Danica didn't wait for praise. She ended with this: "I'm not asking for your trust. I'm offering you control, because no single corporation should own the skies. Not even mine." Then she walked off stage without looking back. That night, headlines across Europe lit up. Danica Holt blindsides Commission with radical openness. Le Monde corporate tech meets democratic values. Geneva session stuns critics. Der Spiegel, from predator to partner. Politico Europe. Victor Hale stared at the coverage from his London hotel suite, lips twitching with disbelief. "She just turned our attack into a goddamn commercial," he muttered. Jason looked pale. What now? Victor didn't answer. He simply shut the laptop. But Danica wasn't celebrating either. The Geneva maneuver was brilliant, necessary, but it came at a cost. The secrets she'd guarded for years were now public architecture. Anyone with enough talent could now replicate elements of her tech. Even Kristen Price had called, cautiously impressed. You made a hell of a move, Kristen said, but you gave up your leverage. Danica replied coldly, not leverage, liability. Kristen chuckled. You're playing legacy. I should have known. Danica didn't answer because deep down she knew Kristen was right. This wasn't just about winning the war, it was about changing the air we all breathed for good. But legacy came with risks, and the next one was already waiting in the shadows. Late that night, Monica burst into Danica's penthouse suite holding a flash drive and a shaken look on her face. You need to see this, she said breathless. Danica took the drive and loaded it onto her private terminal. The screen lit up with a security video, grainy but clear. It showed two figures meeting in a Prague cafe. One was Jason Voss. The other was someone from inside Carter Holt. A mole. Someone had been feeding their enemies information for months. Details about infrastructure contracts, even personal travel data. Danica's heart didn't skip a beat. It stopped. Monica whispered, it's someone from your inner circle. Danica stared at the footage. Find out who, she said coldly. And when you do, I'll deal with them myself. The Prague footage played again on Danica's private monitor. The camera angle wasn't ideal, but facial recognition had already done the work. Monica didn't say the name out loud. She didn't need to. Danica's voice was like ice. How long? Minimum 6 months, Monica replied. Cross-reference flight logs, calendar leaks, and 2 scrub data pulls from our Zurich server. Whoever it is, they had deep clearance. Danica nodded, her hands folded tightly in front of her. Her jaw tensed as she stared at the still frame of the person seated across from Jason Voss. It was Rajiv Gopal, her global compliance chief, the man who'd sat beside her during the Luxembourg crisis, who had once carried her father's casket, who toasted her mother's cancer remission. He hadn't just betrayed the company, he had betrayed her personally. The next morning, Danica called an emergency executive meeting, but not in the usual glass-walled boardroom. This time, she booked the Atlas Room, a secure, high-surveillance chamber with no digital access points, no personal devices, and acoustic shielding built into the walls. The team filed in slowly. Monica, Henry from logistics, Paige from corporate affairs. Even Kristen Price, who'd been unofficially consulting again. Rajaev was the last to enter, calm, smiling faintly, as if he didn't know the hammer was about to fall. Danica stood at the head of the table and said only one word, play it. The lights dimmed. Monica hit play on the wall monitor. The video rolled silent, colorless, damning. The camera cut to the moment Rajiv handed a sleek drive to Jason Voss over coffee in Prague. Then it lingered, and the silence in the Atlas Room turned suffocating. Rajiv didn't blink. When the lights returned, no one said a word. Danica looked directly at him. Why? Rajaev finally stood. Because I believed in Carter Holt before it became your redemption tour. Danica's eyes narrowed. That's your excuse for treason, he shrugged. You made the company about you, the savior, the face, but empires don't survive worship. They survive balance. You sold our data. Kristen interrupted, her voice tight with fury. You endangered our partnerships, our clients. I slowed you down, Rajiv said, calm as ever, so the rest of the world could catch up. Someone had to keep you from becoming Amazon with air rights. Danica walked toward him slowly. You had access to my family's travel logs, to Monica's medical records. You didn't just leak tech, you aimed for our lives. Rajiv hesitated. I gave Jason leverage, not orders. You gave him weapons, Danica said, almost whispering. Then she turned to Monica. Activate Protocol 13. Monica blinked. Are you sure? Danica nodded. Now. In under 90 seconds, 6 black-suited agents entered the Atlas Room. Silent, professional, badge stamped. They approached Rajiv calmly. Mr. Gopal, under the Carter Holt Sovereign Risk Act, your clearances are revoked. You are hereby detained for federal review, pending coordination with Interpol and the SEC. Rajav's face twisted with rage for the first time. You're arresting me under your own private security charter. Danica didn't blink. I'm turning you over to every country you endangered. You didn't just break NDA, you violated international cyber defense law. Multiple jurisdictions are waiting. As the agents escorted him out, Rajiv's final words echoed across the Atlas Room. You're not saving this company. You're making yourself queen of a broken kingdom. Danica waited until the doors closed. Then she turned to the stunned room. No more shadows, no more tolerance for traitors. From this moment forward, Carter Holt operates like a republic, not a dynasty. Everyone is accountable, including me. She paused. Especially me. The fallout was swift and global. Rajiev's arrest triggered secondary investigations. Jason Voss disappeared from public view. Victor Hale issued a vague statement disavowing unsanctioned third-party actions. The Carter Holt stock price dipped again, then stabilized. And something new took root. Trust. Not perfection, not fanfare, but quiet trust rebuilt in the ashes of betrayal. Danica received a private message from the Luxembourg commissioner. That was brutal and brave. If you're ever in Brussels again, I owe you dinner. Not protocol, just thanks. Kristen Price stopped by Danica's office the next morning holding 2 coffees and a sly grin. Never thought I'd say this, but I'm impressed. That wasn't just damage control. That was justice. Danica accepted the coffee. Don't romanticize it. I still lost a friend. Kristen softened. Sometimes you lose a pawn. Sometimes you sacrifice a bishop. But you, Danica, you just took the queen back. Danica stared out the window watching planes streak through the sky. They were hers, but not hers to own, only to protect. And she wasn't finished yet, because the final endgame hadn't arrived. But it was closer than anyone realized. The day began with a letter. Not an email, not a text. A sealed envelope delivered to the front desk of Carter Holt Ventures in New York, marked only with a crimson wax insignia, a jackal's head with a crown of circuitry. Danica recognized it instantly. Only 3 people in the world knew that symbol. All of them had been part of the original Sentinel Alliance, a secret think tank Danica helped form during her pre-CEO years, dedicated to cybersecurity, quantum ethics, and black market disruption. 2 were dead. The third was Jason Voss. Monica opened the letter, gloves on protocol tight. No explosives, no powder. Just a single page handwritten in the same calligraphy Jason used in grad school. Danica, the board doesn't see you coming. Victor's playing both sides. The Prague handoff was only the decoy. You think you've locked me out. You've only shown me the map. Let the next move be yours. I'll be waiting. Jay. Monica looked up. It's taunting, but also it's a breadcrumb. Danica took the page and read it again. Her hands didn't shake, but her mind flashed through every possible interpretation. If Jason was resurfacing now, it wasn't just for revenge. It was for control. Meanwhile, Victor Hale was in Singapore holding court with top investors at a private summit. Officially, he was still exploring future opportunities. Unofficially, he had just launched Parallax Systems, a stealth mode competitor built by absorbing old Halston Dynamics engineers and ex-Carter Holt contractors. And its aim, not software, airborne data sovereignty. Victor wanted to take Danica's newest project, Project Ether, and beat her to market by 6 months. But he had a problem. He needed someone who could crack the final access key to the original Carter Holt blueprint. That key had been split 3 ways. Danica held one, Monica held the second. And the third, Jason Voss. Danica sat in her secure Denver suite surrounded by encrypted schematics and regional feeds. She didn't speak for several minutes, just stared at the jackal emblem burned into her screen. This isn't a business war anymore, she finally said. Monica nodded. Then what is it? Danica turned. Her eyes were steel. It's a redemption gambit. That night, Danica went dark. No cell, no tracking. Only one person knew where she was heading, Monica, and only under silent protocol. She boarded a private jet bound for Reykjavik. The target wasn't Jason. It was Dr. Beatrix Jen, the only living architect of the Sentinel kill switch framework, the one system that could override any airborne data chain remotely regardless of platform. Dr. Jen lived off-grid now, having faked her death after the Marrakesh AI Accords scandal. Danica had helped fund her disappearance. Finding her again wouldn't be easy. But if Jason was building a ghost system, Danica needed a ghostbuster. Back in New York, Monica intercepted a call on the private network. The signal came from somewhere inside Carter Holt HQ. A deep male voice spoke through scrambled tones. You're out of time. He's already accessed the backbone array. Danica doesn't know he has the Singapore fail-safe. If she steps into Reykjavik without a decoy trail, she'll trigger the Ledger firewall. You need to warn her. Who is this? Monica snapped. Someone who used to wear your badge. Check the elevator logs. 11:32 p.m. Tuesday. Sublevel 3. Then the line went dead. Kristen barged in 10 minutes later holding a folder. Monica, you're going to want to see this. Inside were hard copies of security stills. Jason Voss, in a maintenance uniform, entering the building 3 nights ago. How Monica whispered. Kristen's mouth was tight. He has a back door. And worse, someone let him in. Monica stared at the image, then up at Kristen. You think it's Dean? Kristen didn't answer, but her silence was loud. Midair over the North Atlantic, Danica received a ping on her emergency console, a message traced to no known origin point. It read, "He's already in Reykjavik. He brought the failsafe. Don't trust the pilot." Danica glanced up. The pilot's silhouette shifted ever so slightly behind the frosted glass. Without blinking, she unbuckled her seatbelt, slid open the side panel, and extracted a compact stun stick from the emergency kit, just in case. If this flight was compromised, she had less than 30 minutes to reroute or neutralize, because the endgame Jason promised was no longer hypothetical. It had just begun. Danica Holt landed at a private airstrip 20 minutes outside Reykjavik under a cloak of engineered fog and firewalled signals. The landing wasn't smooth turbulence wind shear and what her digital dashboard called active GPS spoofing. In other words, someone didn't want her here. She stepped onto the tarmac in a matte black coat lined with electromagnetic shielding, her hair tightly pulled back, her mind sharper than ever. Waiting at the hangar was a single unmarked Tesla Cybervan retrofitted with Icelandic plates and no ID tags. Inside sat a man in his 60s with a silver beard and scar over his left brow. Name, Danica asked without sitting. Jon Magnusson. I was told you were coming, by Beatrix. So she was still alive. Danica nodded and entered. The doors locked with a vacuum seal, and the vehicle pulled away into the night. Inside the van, Jon briefed her. Beatrix has been living under the identity of an Arctic data archivist hiding inside a glacier lab, camouflaged beneath a UNESCO climate observatory. She was safe until 3 days ago. Then he came. Jason Voss. He didn't come to kill her, Jon continued. He came to recruit her. Danica's jaw tightened. That meant Jason was near the final phase. Whatever scheme he had planned, it required the only person who could break the Carter Holt firewall without leaving a trace. Jon handed Danica a retinal chip. She left this for you, said if anyone else opened it, it would fry. Danica inserted it into her wrist pad. A blue hollow expanded with Beatrix Jen's voice. Danica, if you're hearing this, Jason has my secondary core. He's not just after Carter Holt's data. He's trying to build a decentralized AI state. No oversight, no borders, just code. You have two choices. Stop him or join him. Either way, the window closes in 24 hours. Back in New York, Monica Reed was racing against time. She and Kristen were inside Carter Holt's sub-level command center, a place so secret only 5 people knew it existed. The servers were cooling rapidly, but the air wasn't. Jason's ghostware bypassed our spectral filters, Kristen said, fingers flying across the console. He's creating mirror nodes from inside our system. If he copies Project Ether's base code, he won't just launch first, he'll bury us in litigation. Monica hit a switch and launched their last resort protocol, Glassheart, a self-destructing sandbox to isolate all outbound packets. Shut down all bridges to the Oslo relay, she ordered. Kristen paused. But Oslo links to the UN Netfair trial. I know. The price of defense was visibility. They'd have to go dark to stay alive. In Iceland, Danica and Hon hiked 2 miles across frozen terrain to reach the entrance to the glacier lab. Danica was exhausted, but her adrenaline overrode it. As they neared the camouflaged entry point, disguised as a melted runoff vault, Jon stopped. What is it, she asked. Jon turned and smiled. It wasn't June anymore. It was Jason. You really thought Beatrix would leave the door unlocked, he said coolly. Before Danica could reach for her stun rod, 4 drones descended from the sky, each blinking in red crosshairs. Jason stepped forward. You're the only one I respect enough to take alive. Danica smirked. Pity. I brought a kill switch. With a flick of her glove, the electromagnetic mesh in her coat flared, frying 2 of the drones instantly. She dropped to the ice, rolled sideways, and activated a subdermal beacon on her hip. From 50 yards away, a second van, the real one, burst through a snowbank, crashing into the drone formation with a sonic pulse. Out stepped Beatrix, Gen rifle slung over her shoulder, eyes like daggers. Hello again, Jason, she said. I told you I'd bury you in ice one day. Danica climbed into the new van, breathing hard. Jason, now disarmed and frozen in shock, was lifted into a kinetic field by Beatrix's assistance. No cuffs, just containment. Danica faced him one last time. You didn't lose to me because I was smarter, she said. You lost because I believed in something bigger than erasing the system. I rebuilt it. Jason chuckled through bloody lips. They'll never let you keep it. Danica leaned in. I'm not asking them. Back in New York, Monica received the secure burst transmission. Jason Voss captured. Project Ether secured. Launch date advanced. Kristen turned to her with tears in her eyes. We did it, Monica exhaled. No, she did it. We just held the door. The stage was set in Geneva, not at a conference hall or secret summit, but at the World Digital Sovereignty Forum, a gathering of over 2,000 delegates, 70 heads of state, and every major tech and defense corporation on Earth. Danica Holt once whispered about as the woman who played too clean now stood as the architect of Project Ether, a fully sovereign airborne data infrastructure that rendered borders obsolete and governments accountable. The moment she stepped onto the obsidian-lit stage, the chatter stopped. Her black suit bore no logo, no badge, just presence. Behind her, a digital backdrop shimmered to life with one phrase, not revolution, restoration. 2 years ago, Danica began a private network of men tried to hijack your future. They wanted to rebuild data governance under a different name, but the same hunger for control. She took a breath. They called it evolution. I call it entropy. Gasps rippled. In the last 6 months, we neutralized 42 rogue AI nodes across 13 countries, froze 2.3 billion on the dark investments, and brought back the only person who ever beat me at chess, just to make sure I hadn't missed a move. She smiled. Jason Voss, now a monitored consultant inside the UN's Digital Ethics Task Force, watched from a secured side chamber. He didn't smile, but he didn't look away either. Danica continued, Project Ether isn't about power. It's about truth. It doesn't sell your data. It doesn't hide your algorithmic profile. It doesn't weaponize your clicks. She paused. It listens, it learns, but it never forgets who owns it, you. Behind her, a live satellite feed of the Ether network lit up hundreds of nodes suspended in low-orbit mesh, forming a digital aurora over the planet. Danica turned back to the crowd. I've been called radical, dangerous, even naive. But I believe our systems should fear lying to us more than we fear telling them the truth. In the crowd, Monica sat next to Beatrix Jen. Both wore discreet earpieces, feeding them threat analytics in real time. So far, no anomalies, no disruptions. But something unexpected happened. As Danica closed her speech, every single head of state stood up. They didn't just applaud, they saluted. Even the prime minister of the country that once tried to blacklist her technology placed a hand on his heart. A man from the African Union delegation stood and shouted, "Let the world be rebuilt by builders, not brokers." Applause thundered. Danica bowed her head slightly. Then she said the final words that would become etched into history books, AI compacts and protest murals alike. If technology is our mirror, then let it show us something worth becoming. 6 months later, a global compact was signed, the Ether Accords. 3 major data conglomerates dissolved. 2 black ops agencies were absorbed into civilian oversight. And Danica Holt, she declined the Nobel Prize. Instead, she donated the entire Project Ether source code to an open global trust monitored by a rotating jury of technologists, ethicists, and everyday users selected at random every year. Her only request, let no one person control the signal. Jason Voss now taught at a small university in the Swiss Alps. He lived in a cabin with 2 dogs and no broadband. He still wrote code, but never without signing each one. For DH, I was wrong. Monica Reed became Director of Quantum Ethics at the United Nations, where she launched the first child-safe AI ambassador program. Kristen published the definitive expose on the Carter-Holt crisis, her book titled Silent Code: The Woman Who Killed the Ghost. It became a bestseller in over 90 countries. Beatrix Jen returned to the ice. She preferred the silence. And Danica, she disappeared from public view after the Geneva address. No interviews, no press, no endorsements. Only a quiet message on the Ether home screen. You are now connected to a system that sees you not as data, but as a decision. Some said she was building something even bigger in the shadows. Others believed she was finally resting. But those who knew her best, Monica, Beatrix, Kristen, believed one thing for certain. Danica Holt wasn't finished. She was just waiting for the next move. This story teaches us that true leadership isn't about control, prestige, or dominance. It's about integrity, responsibility, and courage in the face of systemic deceit. Danica Holt, the Black CEO, dismissed, mocked, and pushed aside, never resorted to revenge or spectacle. Instead, she used strategy, transparency, and collective empowerment to dismantle a shadow network of corruption and replace it with a system grounded in ethics and trust. She didn't fight for a seat at their table, she built a better one. It reminds us that in a world increasingly driven by technology, the soul of every system must still be human. The most revolutionary act is not building a smarter machine, it's building a fairer one. So the next time someone tells you you're too honest for business or too principled for power, remember this? History doesn't remember the gatekeepers. It remembers the ones who tore the gates down and left them open.